Hello and welcome back to the Stronghold. I'm the Magi, and today we are going to be taking a fresh look at all of those sets that came out during the 2023 budget year and are still in Standard. The goal is to make sure that you have everything you need as a budget player from Dominaria United, the Brothers War, Phyrexian All Will Be One, and March of the Machines, so that you can get everything you can out of your budget arena experience. But before we get into all that, take just a moment to like, comment, and subscribe, because that kind of thing really keeps this boat moving. Now, what were we talking about? Oh yeah, right. Alright, so let's start things off here by being 100% transparent and honest. If you were following the plan during all of the 2023 season, you've probably got all of this covered. However, if you're feeling a little late to the party, like maybe you came in mid-season or maybe you just started, there is a lot of good stuff in these four sets that is worth adding to your collection. But let's face it, at the same time, you don't want to spend all of your wild cards on things that are the closest to rotating out of the standard environment. So today we're going to be taking a look at these sets and helping you pick the heavy hitters, those that are punching above their weight, getting those particularly low rarity cards that are going to do a lot of work for you, where the rares are worth spending, etc., etc. And we're going to be accomplishing this by looking at a number of categories that I believe have the potential to do that heavy hitting and punching above their weight, areas where you are going to get the most bang for your buck. One of those is, of course, red deck wins. And honestly, this year, for the first time, may not be one of the tier 1 go-to budget decks, but that remains to be seen. Still, investing in that long-term is going to have positive impacts. Of course, lower rarity cards that end up being build-arounds, also very, very strong. Of course, meta staples are one of those things that everyone should be considering. And then, of course, we're going to have a few of those cards that are just one-of bangers, where putting just one copy in your collection is going to have way more impact than a lot of the other things you could have done with that wild card. And of course, this is also going to be a solid place to talk about those singleton formats like Standard Brawl and 100 card Historic Brawl. What I am not attempting to do in this video is talk about every corner case scenario, every card that is good in one deck or another, everything that you might want in your collection given certain circumstances. We're only going to be focused on those cards that are going to do the most for the least. Starting things off in mono red, there's two uncommons that consistently hit above their weight limits. Of course, Monastery Swiftspear is a staple in any sort of prowess deck, particularly mono red prowess. I'm not 100% sure mono red prowess is going to be the deck this year, but I don't think you'll ever really regret having this card in your collection. And hey, if you're going to be crafting this card, allow me to recommend reaching back for the original artwork for Khans of Tarkir. In my opinion, it just adds a little class to your collection, but hey, to each their own. That's how personal preference works. Normally when it comes to mono red, I try and only recommend one uncommon, but of course we can't really forget about Phoenix Chick, which I think honestly is a better mono red uncommon card than Monastery Swiftspear in a vacuum. But of course, Standard and other formats are not vacuums, and Swiftspear has some undeniable playability. But Phoenix Chick is also ridiculously good. It's evasive, it's hasty, it can resurrect itself under certain circumstances, it can't block, but then again, no one card should be everything. If your wild cards are particularly tight, I would consider doing 4 of one of these and 2 of the other. Again, personal preference being a thing. If you believe in the prowess deck, obviously Swift Spear is where you want to be. If you want to be more positioned for the long term for a more generically placed mono red deck, I think Phoenix Chick wins out. Also in red, we've got 2 rare legendary creatures that I think are strong singleton considerations for your mono red deck. First up, Feldon Ronin Excavator not only gives you a hasty 2-drop 2/2 that unfortunately can't block, but when it's dealt damage, you functionally get to draw cards. Squee as a 2/2 hasty 3-drop brings another goblin to the party every time he swings, and that goblin hopefully doesn't go anywhere and just continues to add to your board presence. Both strong cards to add as singleton pieces, both for their remaining standard career as well as long into eternal formats. Now let's turn our focus towards those singleton formats, whether it's Standard Brawl or the formerly known as Historic Brawl, the 100-card format, using the historic/timeless card pool. First off, we've got an uncommon that is a potential commander for both of those formats. Ellis of Core, Sadistic Pilgrim. I've actually talked about this card multiple times through its standard lifespan here, and well, it's still punching above its weight. Not only does this make a fantastic commander, but it fits very nicely into the 99 of various other decks, as well as in the 60-card constructed lanes as well. Also keep in mind that its life gain, life loss triggers may interact very favorably with the white-black bats and their life matters deck archetype being featured, and maybe the best archetype for budget players in Bloomborough. We'll have to see. It's still a little up in the air, but I think that format's going to be very strong, and this is going to fit into it very nicely. Next up, we've got Plaza of Heroes. This card was pretty much literally made for those singleton, don't call it commander formats. It taps for colorless mana. It can tap for a mana of any color that can only be used to cast legendary creatures, or add a mana of any color among legendary permanents you control. So this really helps get your commander out. Once your commander's out, it's color fixing for all your other spells within the deck. And of course, don't forget about that last clause. You can pay 3 and exile Plaza of Heroes, and target legendary creature gains hexproof and indestructible until end of turn. So it can save your commander or any other legendary creature you have on the field. One of each of these, I think, make strong additions to your collection that give you a lot of cross-integration into other formats. Sadly, the later you look at a set in its lifespan, the less appealing things like build-around cards become, particularly for budget players. For instance, Phyrexia All Will Be One offered up a lot of poison, toxic-based decks, many of which are very good and have done quite well throughout their standard career, and will likely to continue to do well in Eternal formats. But the amount of cards that you would need makes them, well, somewhat unattractive for us budget players. If you already have the basis for these decks, adding a few cards to make it better is one thing, but now is probably not the time you want to start on these from scratch. But there are, however, a number of singleton cards that will add a lot of fight to your collection. both in Brawl, Commander style singleton formats, as well as those 60 card constructed for Standard here. First up, I highly recommend a single copy of Atraxis Skitterfang. A colorless uncommon for only 3 mana, gives you a 2/2 body that comes with 3 oil counters on it. And the reason I love this card so much is it adds a Swiss Army knife style flexibility to your creatures on the board, including itself. By removing one of those oil counters as you begin combat, you can give a creature of your choice either flying, vigilance, death touch, or lifelink until end of turn. Although Skitterfang can't swing the turn it comes in, if you play it in your first main phase, it is still available to give those abilities to another creature the turn it comes down. And oftentimes, evasion, lifelink is just what you need in order to close out a game. And this card fits into virtually any deck you will build. Next up, take a look at a serious heavy hitter, Atali Primal Conqueror. Yes, it's 7 mana, but it's a 7/7 Elder Dinosaur legendary creature. This makes a powerhouse addition to your existing dinosaur deck this year, both as a top-end powerhouse piece. If you transform it, it basically becomes like a one-shot poison kill, if I remember correctly. And, oh yeah, Atali has been a meta contender commander since it was introduced. And my last recommendation for a single wildcard consideration is Thran Portal. And, you know, I'm going to be honest, I didn't plan on recommending this card this year. I felt like it was a little too close to rotating out of Standard to be quite as useful. I recommended it all last year and felt really good about it all the way through the year. However, now having seen Bloomburrow's previews, 2 color strategies, of course, are not going anywhere. They probably never will. But this gives you a lot of flexibility to add some color mana fixing to any deck, as opposed to something like a Pain Land that tends to be color pair specific. What really pushed this over the edge is the life loss trigger on this. And it might actually seem a little counterintuitive, but one of the strongest Bloomburrow potential decks for us budget players this year, as I mentioned earlier, is the white-black Bats Life Matters. And having the ability to make yourself lose life on demand in that deck could have a lot of high potential, and I think that is enough to tip the scales and make this a good, strong recommendation for this year. Of course, you will continue to play this card in Eternal for years to come, as it will fit into any multicolor deck that you build. So there it is, guys. There are my thoughts and recommendations on those cards from 2023 that I feel like every budget player should still have in their collection. Again, it wasn't intended to be an exhausted list, every single card that might fit into every single deck, but I think these are the ones that will do the most for the least. But I still want to know what you think. What's on your radar? Drop down in the comments. Let me know what you're thinking about from these sets and why. And before we go, of course, I always want to thank my entire Patreon community for supporting not just my passion, but the community at large. And in particular, this time around, I wanted to recognize Searing Blaze and Kenny F. They are coming up on their 1-year anniversary of support. Thank you all. Thank you guys. I could not do this without you. And of course, let me leave you with some suggestions for your next step here on the channel.